like a curse or a hex. This is life, wheelbarrow full of regrets. I do this for my fam. If you messing with that, you gon' make me give you a permanent mess, and you don't want that. This is not for the block. This is for my people trying to think out the box. This hook ain't for the streets. Get out the box.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Den of Lore. Grab your glasses of scotch, pull your chair up to the fire, because we're going to learn some very cool shit, courtesy of Vanese McNeill, one of the wonderful, beautiful, amazing minds behind Magical Egypt Series 1 and 2. And I know I'm watching her on the video screen right now, which you can't see, and she's kind of blushing, because I talk her up because she is that awesome. And we're going to be talking about Magical Egypt behind the scenes for what will very well be our last live show for the year 2017. Now, I said that last year was going to be the last show, or last show was going to be the last show, and I kind of lied about that because Venise was available, and she is so awesome and sweet and amazing that she said, yes, Chris, I will come on your show, and we will talk some business and talk some amazing marketing of Magical Egypt Series 2 and give people a behind-the-scenes look for our November Masterclass, which I am actually going to be making available to everyone for this month for the live show, because I think everyone should have a chance to be able to see her live and see this happen, and it's an early Christmas present to all of you out there and to everyone who is in our Patreon list, in our Masterclass and Illustrious Master list. You'll be able to see this starting after the show, pretty well right after we are done on Patreon. So, but for the live show, I want to make sure that we do this actually live, because Venise was very excited about being on the radio. And I'm like, okay, we'll make this a live thing. I'm like, okay, that's cool. For her, I will. And Venise, welcome to the Den of Lore.
Thank you so much, Dylan. Yes, look, I was very excited to be on your radio. So thank you. I feel very honored and very privileged indeed.
Oh, and for the privilege is all mine, and for all of us to have you on here, again, for having gotten to know you over the last 9 months, you're probably one of the coolest people and most amazing people I know, and just as amazing as our patrons who support the show and ensure that we can do this show week in, week out. For all the patrons who are out there, you guys know me, you know what I've been going through, 120-hour work weeks the last month and a half, plus building a nursery, and yeah, I'm hoping to have some audio episodes up on the Patreon list coming tomorrow. That's if my wife is not actually in labor, but she may actually have started, as apparently she may be feeling contractions at the moment. So if I cancel the rest of this broadcast suddenly, then expect that you'll have a new denizen at some point. But for our like Venise, you're a part of one of the most coolest miniseries on the planet, and you know that for any type of content, even if somebody's watching it for free, it still doesn't. It's still not free to produce. There is costs involved, and just like with this show, we have a dedicated internet line. We have a web server. We've got a web server for our store. I have a long distance plan as well as a telephone number that we can talk to most of our American guests, which is paid for. And now that we actually have individuals who we're bringing on board, that can help me run the show. As I was mentioning to Venise, it's like I'm the only person here in studio. I've got a laptop that connects to my desktop workstation so that I can control the production from this laptop, because I've got nobody else here. And we have some denizens who are bringing in that part of the Patreon donation is going to be going towards them so that I can spend more time actually producing the show in terms of research for guests, in terms of the graphics, in terms of booking guests, and making sure that the content is as good as possible for you guys. And if you guys didn't contribute, I wouldn't be able to do that. We'd still be doing no video And I'd still be upstairs in, a closet talking to you guys on a desk that I built for myself out of plywood and some particle board. So, to our illustrious masters first, I want to thank you very much for your support over the last several months. Jackie from across the pond, in addition also to Pat from Brooklyn. Pat, just to give you a heads up, you did win the November contest. Email me. You get a custom designed t-shirt. If you want that, man, you got to let me know so I can get it to you before Christmas. And to our masters, Lee Veltman, to Chuck Schwartz, to Antonio Martinez, Frederick Johnson, Jared Thompson, Mrs. Fox, Roses, Wayne, Joshua Ematic, and our den mother, Ellen McCurdy, who I've seen in chat. Again, for anyone who's joining us, thank you very much. As well as to Mark Catalano, who is, you may need to update your Patreon list because you're still being listed as a fellow craft, even though you have been a master for the last several months. And to the rest of our patrons, to Charles Davis, to Dobermere, to Matthew Toth, to Thiago, who recently just joined with us, as well as Michael Eckhoff, Dean John Kenward, Anthony Derry, Atlantic Koosh, the best name ever, and Venise from Magical Egypt, who does contribute to the show. Thank you very much. As well as to Sentient, Christopher Moody, and Robin Weebley. You guys are the reason why Den of Lore exists, and you're the reason why I do this show. It's your passion and your love of this content manner, and the fact that we say whatever the fuck we want on air, unrestricted by commercials or corporate sponsors. Any sponsors that we do have, it is you guys. You are our sponsors. I make the show for you. So to you, thank you very much. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa. Whatever you subscribe to as far as a faith or a religion, if your holiday season is this month, I bid you the best possible. So that is the only commercial you hear on the show, and you can go to patreon.com/Den of Lore and support the show if you like, and I'll be giving that reminder at the end of the show as well. So that is all I have. And Venise, one thing I do have, or don't have, is your written bio, so I can't actually write your bio out, or read your bio out, which is good, because apparently I will not butcher any names that you may have, or any, because that's a... So guys, if you're looking for the, if Chris butchers a name or a pronunciation, take a shot, just take a shot, because I'm just saying that's your free shot for the day.
Well, do you want me to give a little bit of a background?
If you could, and also we'll be talking about that in the Discord server. Bram has it in the show notes, and I'll be putting that in the show note links. So if you could, that'd be much appreciated. Thank you.
No problem, sweetie. My background really is production. I have done television production for kind of the last 30 years, perhaps, and direct marketing as well. So I kind of did television production for direct marketing. And then in 2000, I met the love of my life, which is Mr. Chance Gardner, and we fell in love. And since then, we've been working together to produce and to market these shows primarily. And we still occasionally have to take some commercial work, but that's kind of really what I've been doing for the last period. Now,
I think it's quite awesome. You actually have your own IDMB entry, which that was the extent of the research that I was able to do with being out of the house today. I was called away on some urgent business, mostly just picking up like cribs and stuff. But I know that you have a fair amount of esoteric work as well. It's not just the commercial work and not just the video production, but you also do have a lot of research that you do on the esoteric side.
Yes, well, I mean, I've always been passionate about it. And to be honest with you, my mother died when I was 16. And that really was the impetus to push me into the whole side of, looking into there's more than just this material world. And so when I met Chance, I'd already had quite a lot of research under my belt, and primarily, I would say, work along the line of initiatic work, trying to really improve myself, trying to build myself, trying to be all that I could be. And that really is a really interesting journey to be an initiate, self-initiated initiate, but to be on the path of really bettering yourself. And so when I met Chance, we had a lot to talk about and a lot in common. And so since that point, we've kind of directed the focus a little bit more into things that are in line with the story that we want to tell. But yes, my father was a Freemason, and he really talked to us since we were children about things that were on the esoteric and occult side of things, for sure.
Well, that was one thing you didn't mention before, but it makes a little bit more sense. So, ladies and gentlemen, yes, Illuminati confirmed. We'll just putting that out there. We are everywhere. We control the 6 biggest cat companies on the planet.
I absolutely do. And cat food. But yeah, my dad and my grandfather were both Master Masons. I'm not even really sure what that means, but I do know that he would rub our back every night as we were going to sleep, and we would ask questions like, what would happen when you die? And Daddy had really good answers for those kinds of questions.
One thing that I noticed from, especially with Masonic teachings, and I posed Graham this notice. He knew it at that point. When you're a fan of a writer or an author and you have no connection to this world as far as broadcasting the research and the broadcast of that research to individuals on podcasts and radio shows and what have you, most of the time, if you're talking to an author and you just come up with a crazy crackpot theory and you express it over like several pages of Facebook text, they generally don't read it because they're busy people, and you're just a guy. So I had this whole thing where it's like, I watched this talk and you're talking about the Egyptian way of the afterlife and how there's the duat and how the person's heart is weighed against a feather, etc., etc., etc. And there was a lot of similarities between the two. And, the knowledge has been passed on, or at least it seems to be very parallel or similar to a lot of the information that was available 5,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago. But from that teachings that at least he explained to you, how was this something that he had done over an extended period of time? Like, did he become a Mason while you were growing up, or was it something that happened before?
Well, my father was blind when I was born, and he had a kind of a really interesting journey. He ended up being the largest privately owned printing company in Australia. But as far as his journey within Freemasonry, I don't know that much about it. My exposure to Freemasonry was that we would go to like the Christmas party, and my father would perform and the ladies were allowed to come, and that was kind of my exposure to it. But he also produced published a book in Australia called The Guide to the Occult. And so he honestly had a passion for this information as well. So I can't really speak to his journey within the lodge, but I know that there was an interest there. And I mean, as kids, when we were in bed, even really at 6 or 7 years of age, we weren't asking questions about baseball or football. We were asking questions about the occult. And so we really had a great founding as we were growing up.
And I'm just actually looking this up because I think it's actually been shown to me before by my brother-in-law. It may have been. He'll probably correct me if I'm wrong. The last time I was in Australia, it was a very festive time for me. So some details are hazy, but this is available right now in the National Library of Australia collection, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it is McNeill Publications, and it's called The Guide to the Occult, and it was written by Lance Wedlick.
Yes, that's what I'm looking at.
Yes. Yeah.
And
good find.
Google, wonderful thing. Yes, Wednill Publications.
Lance was really amazing. Lance was a big esotericist. And so Lance was able, would tell, as I remember as a child, tell stories of moving things with his mind and all kinds of things. It was very, very interesting. Lance, and he's, unfortunately, well, as my father has passed away a long time ago. But yeah, we had ghost movements in our house and all kinds of things. So we had a very interesting exposure to the esoteric and the occult. Absolutely.
And I'm also seeing some other books that are under his name as well. And let's see, what fish is that?
What fish is that? How to catch a trout. I mean, we had something like 22 fishing books as well. And so my father had a publishing company, and he couldn't get the books printed because there was a monopoly in Australia. And so my father started a printing company as well. And so we printed all of those books. We printed lots of magazines. And he had a really, as I said, it was the largest privately owned printing company for a while. And then what happened was that the monopoly didn't appreciate this up and comer. And so they dropped their prices significantly to put him out of business. And my father sold the business just before that happened. And that was kind of interesting. So, but anyway,
you've always had that exposure to this world, from a young age.
Yes.
And
business and marketing, all of those kinds of things together. And so I'm really very much the result of that.
I'd say it's a pretty good result. There's marketing's a good world to be in. It's from the potentially soon to be, maybe very soon to be father. It's one of those things that I hope to be able to pass down to my kids, and it really helps you understand the world on a more fundamental level.
Look, I mean, I agree with you. What I love about it, the thing that I think I'm most passionate about is that you're playing with people's attention, okay? And so you're in the space and you're trying to figure out what is it that people are interested in, what is it that moves people. And that aspect of it, I really enjoy. The psychology of it is fascinating to me. The reason I'm so glad that I don't have to do it professionally anymore is because you feel like you're selling, or I felt like I was selling my soul trying to use that superpower for products that I didn't believe in, right? Because it really is a superpower, knowing how to get people's attention. It's very powerful stuff. And that's Chance's story too. Like Chance will say himself that when he worked for Fox, he was using his superpowers to get attention for the Fox network. And so to be able to use those superpowers now to share information that I hope people find interesting and entertaining and challenging and educational is really a gift, to be able to move out of that into this.
Now, you said that you met him several years ago, and I know that you're currently listed as one of the co-producers on Magical Egypt Series 1,
Yes.
Which I believe is are you still having that promotion on Magical Egypt as well?
Yes.
Okay, so...
Yes.
So if you want to watch the remastered version, I believe it's 50% off, and the promo code is LOVE, LOVE.
Yes.
So
that is correct, Alan. Or you can buy the new series and get the old series for free too. So there's two ways of doing it, depending on what you want to do. But yes, we have the DVDs and the digitally remastered version, which is streaming online. And yes, I'm the co-producer of that. And at that juncture, Chance had just come off of working with the Fox network and other networks, and was very wealthy at that time. And so basically he funded the production of Magical Egypt 1 himself. And since then, things have changed a little bit, because he really kind of retired from professional work, and I get to be the executive producer of Magical Egypt 2, because the commercial work that I've been doing has kind of enabled us to be able to do that. So Chance very nicely gave me that title.
Now, how did you two meet? If this is a story that can be retold.
It can indeed. It was really funny because Chance had worked out of a studio in San Diego at the same time that I was doing commercial work in that studio. And we really had never met. And 10 years later on, there was a guy there that was his name is Michael Scaglione, and he's a dear friend of both of ours, but he'd never put us together. And so I had moved to New York City, and Michael Scaglione was coming out, and our other friend Steve Tapman took Chance to a restaurant in New York. And Michael Skaggs said to me, "Oh, Venise, we're going to have dinner with this friend of ours, but you're not going to like him. He's a really, really bad boy. And I'm like, ooh, really? And he said, oh, yes, he's into this and he's into that and all kinds of bad things. And I'm like, ooh, really? And I said to Michael, what is his name? And he said to me, his name is Chance. And as soon as I heard his name, I knew that he was the one for me. And so I went home and I got dressed up in my sexiest studs that I could imagine. And we went to the restaurant. And it was really funny because Steve Tapman, who had this long lion mane of hair, and Chance was sitting right next to each other. And he'd cut off his hair, so they had the same haircut. And I walked up and I kind of put my arm around the two guys. And as soon as I looked in his eyes, it was love at first sight. And we've been together ever since.
That is absolutely adorable. And it's I could see that. And my mom always says like ladies love a bad boy. So,
women, I mean, that part of me, I was very much attracted to a bad boy at that time. And I think one of the really amazing things about our relationship is that we continue to grow, and we've grown together. And to be honest, playing music and having our band is really one thing that has enabled us to kind of, people grow and they kind of, come apart and come back together. But I think that our music has really enabled us to kind of keep bumping into each other on life's path. And as well as the documentary, those two things are really gifts for us.
Now, were you around when the filming had started, or at least the conception started for Magical Egypt 1?
Yes, I was. Chance tells the story about meeting John West, and I'm going to put up my hand and claim. Well, the truth is that when I met Chance, he was working in Fox, and he was really, really unhappy at being in Fox because the pressure was so great. I mean, it was just really, really ridiculous hours, and they kind of take the life force out of people at Fox. And so when I met Chance, I was in direct marketing at the time. We talked about, why don't we produce an Egyptian documentary, and we can put it on TV and sell it. So yes, I was really involved in the very first germ of what became Magical Egypt. And because I'm a hound dog, and as I said to you before, send things to me because I get things done. I was the one that was able to get through to John West and Lon Milo Duquette and everybody that's been in the show. And so it's really been a great collaboration because I'm kind of that get it done kind of much. Chance and I are a good team because he's this beautiful creative mind that will sit and ponder and come up with these genius ideas, and I'm the one that's kind of making sure that everything gets done in the background.
So so from what I'm hearing, the idea for the series, or at least saying like, hey, this is an idea that we can actually put forward and create and put out into the market. Well, he may have had the spark, but you had the push to actually get it started, or was it more of a?
Well, no, it was his passion. I mean, he had done an Egyptian project for Fox, and the idea of working with John Anthony West and exploring Egypt and the art of Egypt and the mystery of Egypt was definitely his passion. My part of that was really, I can help you turn it into something that people will be able to see in the world, right? So he's the creator, I'm the distributor, if you will, right? It was and of course, as a production person, I would make the phone calls, set up the shoots, that kind of, production kind of stuff. But Chance and John really, once they met up together, really kind of with the germ of what Magical Egypt would become. I mean, the episode 1 and episode 2 particularly are based on John's original research, and then we had some Baval in there, and we've had Laird in there, and other people's and Lon Milo with the Book of the Dead and Rick Strassman, but John was kind of, instrumental in his research in inspiring Chance into the whole Magical Egypt project.
Now, it's not something that I broadcast or advertise very much, just because I don't ask for thanks for anything that I do if it's for somebody else. Just because if it's the right thing to do, you do it. You don't do it because it'll help your career or what have you. So, Big Sexy and I had, and yes, Alex, I'm calling you Big Sexy on the show. Big Sexy and I had the opportunity to go down and visit Clay Roop back at the end of September. We had set it up for a while, and I know that he's been helping the West family for pretty well since he got there for the last 9 months. I'm like, okay, well, I know that you've been up there. You're going to need some help. You need some outside contact, as it were, from people who at least know you. And if you guys need any help, we're there for you, as it were, because he's
wonderful.
And we ended up going down. I had a chance to be able to meet John, and he's been considering what he's gone through, he's been doing very well. And the last time I talked to Clay a couple of weeks ago, he's been saying like John's been recovering. Has been a slow recovery because he has been fighting off pneumonia, which at John's age is the fact that he was able to overcome stage 4 cancer plus while dealing with pneumonia is a testament not only to his stick-to-itiveness, but also his the type of person that he is and the treatment that he received, and his quick wit never left him. And I can understand the amount that research can really get to you, and it can change your entire perspective. Like, I joked with him. It's like, you were kind of like my Indiana Jones, hero character growing up. I had like the pith helmet, and if it weren't for my mom and the Riddle of the Sphinx, and her liking Charlton Heston, I probably wouldn't have heard about John Anthony West. And
right, exactly.
So his work and his research, which was presented in such a compelling fashion and using common sense, and it was backed up by science with the great Dr. Robert Schoch from Boston University. It goes to show that, yes, we as a species are not necessarily looking at the evidence because of our egos and because of what we know. And he presented the information of what Egypt could potentially actually be to a completely new generation who didn't know who Schwaller was, who didn't know who Gebser was, and presented it in a way that was actually digestible. And, it inspired me, it inspired Chance, it inspired you. Exactly.
The book is great. The book is really fun.
So, if there's anything to be said, it's like John Anthony West is a very magnetic and extremely polarizing figure, but also very inspiring figure. That once you see him traverse a sand dune in Egypt on a horse, with the camera panning across the background, you're like, I want to be like that guy. He looks like he's going places.
John is a remarkable person, and I've known John now since 2000. So, that's 17 years, nearly 18 years. And, we have great fondness for each other, and he really is a lovely man. He used to stay with us in Los Angeles, so we've had a opportunity to spend a lot of time with him. And of course, Chance has been to Egypt with him several times, and he really does have a great sense of humor. He doesn't pull any punches. He really did such a great service. I think one of the reasons that people love Magical Egypt so very much is that the history that you were taught in school left you with a great degree of cognitive dissonance. And then you come and you read John's work, or you see John's work in Magical Egypt, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I have been vindicated, I've been validated, there is another story here. And that is such a gift. That's such a gift to give people, because people, it just doesn't add up. So much what we've been told about so many things, not just ancient Egypt, but about our health, about our money, about our world, just doesn't make sense. And when somebody comes along and says, look, here's another way to look at it, it really just makes everything in the world seem a little bit more comfortable.
Well, and that's kind of the whole, at least what I was able to get from the first Magical Egypt series, is that everything is easy to find as long as you look at the evidence. As long as you just look at the evidence and you look at it from an open mind, and you look at it from a standpoint of a real world open mind. I know that I think it was episode 2 where John had brought Chance into the Royal Cairo Museum, and he's explaining the diorite figurines that are that are in one of the cases, and going, well, this is a bowl, it's diorite. You can't actually machine this thing very easily, even today. And you look at something like this, which is small, it's intricate, it's about this big. It's a very thin vase, and it's completely hollowed out.
With a very thin neck.
And John's just sitting there, and he's explaining it very matter of factly, and with very low tone, gravel in his voice, as he always does when explaining something. And you could just hear. At least I'm thinking that Chance is behind the camera the first time that he's actually hearing this, and going, "This is like, has anybody else seen this shit? Like, this is insane." Now, were you there for that filming of that scene, or was it just Chance that was on?
No, I never got to go to Egypt myself. I know. Look, the first time they went, Chance literally talked to John on Monday and flew out on Tuesday, so the ticket was, crazy expensive. But I'm sure he did. And look, I think the reason is Jeremy Nadler. In fact, we tried to get an interview, but he's kind of left Egypt behind and has moved on. But he makes a really, really good point, and that is that if you look at Egyptology per se at the point in time when Napoleon was interested in it, Egyptology at that point accepted that there was a magic and a mysticism to Egypt, which is why Napoleon went in the first place. But since that period up until very, very recently, the academy per se has kind of tried to rip all of that magic and all of that mysticism and tried to measure everything with rulers and make sense of it that way. And as a result, Egyptology and the academy has become very, very restricted in what they're willing to look at. And so that's why, as Chance calls them, the counterculture of John and Graham and Led and Robert and all of these people have kind of had to go outside of the academy and look at things from a different perspective. And that's why we're able to start introducing a little bit of the magic and mysticism back into the story.
Well, and the magic and mysticism is one of the most important parts of the story, because you can't, even though you and I have talked at length at the world not necessarily being dualism, but also a trinity, but still there is always going to be a flip side of the coin. You do have that second half, and even though everything is grounded within the physical world, in terms of the language, in terms of the history, in terms of the architecture, the mysticism side of it, whether it's, people want to look at it from a metaphorical standpoint to be able to explain something, or from a pure and simple metaphysical standpoint to explain what can potentially be explained by science in who knows how many years once it catches up.
Yes, exactly.
Like that. That's what I found that the difference between Magical Egypt 1 to the Magical Egypt 2 was, which was here Magical Egypt 1 was the explaining of the basis of the story in terms of saying, okay, this is what you know, forget everything. To a certain extent, here's what's really going on. And the Magical Egypt 2 expanded on it to be able to bring that second half, that mirror image to it, which completes the entire story. And it's been very interesting to see going into it, having been exposed to Magical Egypt 1 and coming into 2, it's completely different.
I think that what Chance is trying to get to, and we're not there yet, but the point is the point that he's trying to make is that when you look at ancient Egypt through a different set of eyes, and we've already established that what you thought it was is not, there are things that you can learn from ancient Egypt that can be applied. And so we're trying to get to a place where it's actually operative. And I know that we said it's going to be a 6-season set, but I think it's going to take us a few more episodes to get through the entire story of what Chance wants to tell. And he feels that it really is a story that it's a paradigm shifting story. It can shift and alter the way that we exist in the world. And it all comes from what we're finding in ancient Egypt. One of the things that I think is the most difficult for people to wrap their heads around, and Schwaller de Lubeck's called it the intelligence of the heart, or pharaonic thinking, is that the Egyptians of that period did not think the way that we think now. That their consciousness is really a very different kind of consciousness than the consciousness that we have. And their consciousness was a much more balanced consciousness. Their consciousness was much more tapped into what you might call your higher self, or the unconscious. They had all of that available to them. And so in our mind, that is really kind of shut down and thinks about getting the bills paid and getting to work on time and getting stuck in traffic, and we're really kind of very, very do oriented. To try to put ourselves into that ancient Egyptian mind space is quite difficult. And so a lot of the way that Chance tries to tell the story with images and, detail and taking his time is trying to at least slide us a little bit back into that way of thinking. But that way of thinking enables us to open up to insight, and visionary experiences. And that's a very, very big part of what lots of people have experienced, but not as many as I would like to see in our world.
And from the changes in what you're trying to say now, you had said that it was 6 seasons. Did you mean 6 episodes? Or
6 episodes. Sorry, John, 6 episodes.
I'm like,
so we have 6
we got a
episodes,
scoop
and
here,
we
people.
can probably do a lot more than that. We hope to get to 6 seasons. That would be fantastic, but we're not as young as we used to be. But yeah, it would be great. But yeah, there's going to be more than 6 episodes.
What do you think has been the hardest thing to reconcile with your paradigm in terms of the real world to the esoteric world that has been either open to you from experiences with your father and after the passing of your mother, to what you see every single day? Has there been anything that you've had to really wrap your head around, or really had to work to change your paradigm on?
The first thing that I had to realize was that everything I've been told is wrong, and it might end up making me being called a conspiracy theorist, but I like to think of it much more that I'm a critical thinker now. When I was younger, I would take everything that the news and the schools and the religion and well, not everything, but I was much more susceptible to it. So trying to working in magical Egypt and researching the subjects, I'm much more open to, basically, I'm not going to believe anything, but I'm open to any possibility, right? We talked a little bit earlier about, things that are more like the wrestling of the esotericism. But there is so much there's so much fantastic, miraculous, crazy stuff that is real, that I've opened my mind to those possibilities. We have one of the things is that we'll talk about Egyptology from the 50s era. They would not allow a mysticism in the interpretation of many of the sacred texts. When you start putting that back in, the story kind of gets way out in the stratosphere, or could, depending on the interpretation. And so having to keep an open mind and knowing that what I was told would probably be, is not necessarily true, is probably the biggest adjustment I've had to make.
I have to agree with you on that standpoint. And hopefully you don't get to like a state where I am kind of at, but not really at. Like, I'm in this for the fun of it, because I love talking to people. I love learning cool shit. I just love the personalities and the alternative perspectives. But I've gotten to a certain point, and every single person gets to this point when you're doing what I do, where you're like open-minded or woke as fuck, as we like to say. And you get to that like woke. Oh man, you reach a level of like, this is obviously bullshit, and then you kind of plateau and head back down, and you kind of see things from not necessarily a more closed-minded perspective, but I'm going to say more of a cynical view of things, where the critical thinking can hit you. And
Yes.
like, have you ever reached that point where?
Yes, absolutely, darling. Like you get to the point where you be like, okay, for instance, I get emails from our beautiful, beautiful customers all the time, and sometimes I'll get a request. Can you please interview this person? And I have to respond. Look, we try to be discerning. And you have to be discerning. I mean, you can type anything into the internet and find somebody saying that's true from any possible perspective, okay?
Nibiru
So if I want to
incoming.
find yeah. So if I want to find evidence that the sun's black or the sun's white or the sun's purple, it'll be there. And so the key really is to be discerning. So I would say very much like you, I opened up to everything, and then I've had to pull back and become really discerning about the information that I take in and the information that we're going to purvey out into the marketplace.
And this is one of the things that at least I found with our show, and especially with Magical Egypt, is there is a very rational explanation that's being put behind it. If something's being stated, there's at least some backing within the real world to say, like, this makes sense based on X, Y, Z. Here's some research behind it. Here is some real world actual proof that we've been able to find that we're going to present to you in an unobstructed and unbiased manner. This is our opinion, but you can make up your own mind on the matter, and it's not.
Yes.
It's not twisting the evidence to fit the logic. You're presenting the facts as they are to say this is what we have, and here's some other evidence to say, hey, this could be it.
It could be true, yes.
And
look, I mean, even since the first one, there are things that Chance would not necessarily have in the first series now. Because we've grown, we've evolved, we've learned things. But we're trying to say, here are things that we have found that make sense to us, given the research that we've done to try to explain this. So you're right. And who knows, in 5 years, there might be some things in the season 2 that we might have evolved with as well.
One thing that I know was presented in episode 1 of season 2, which blew my mind, was the architecture shape and how that can represent, or at least it potentially could represent, the two hemispheres of the human mind. And again, I wish I had the image up on screen, but that's the whole point of open conversation. You can't really prepare for it. But you can correct me on the particular monument, but there's one particular monument that has two large arches and a smaller arch in the center. And the two large arches is supposed to represent the two hemispheres of the brain, and the smaller arch, where it lines up with the actual brain, is potentially represents the third eye or the pineal gland. And I saw that, I'm just like, this isn't about ancient history, but I'm so down this rabbit hole, because holy shit, that was mind-blowing to me, to not make too much of a pun. And
well, I mean, it was for Chance too, really. I mean, look, Chance, like you, uses After Effects, and he's doing fades. And in the first Magical Egypt 1, it's the pylon, and he put it over a skull, and it blew his mind. And that's why it kind of took 10 years or 15 years to come out with season 2, because he was trying to ascertain, what did that mean? And it took us all that time to get to the story that we're at now, because it is mind-blowing. And
how was the research, how did it progress from okay, well, this is interesting, I'm going to start doing some research on this, to, shit, we've got the start of another series? And how did that progress from the way you saw things?
From my perspective, as I said, the pylon thing really blew Chance's mind, and he started researching, and he came across the research of Gary Osborne. And Gary Osborne, in many ways, was able to validate the ideas that Chance had about it. And there was a young man, Brad Clausen, who had contacted John West, and John sent him to us and said, you might find that Brad's research is of interest to you. And that research really validated what Chance's belief was about this. And so it was really, he says there was a core team. It was really, the fact that Brad and Gary kind of came to the same conclusions about other aspects of the art that were telling a similar story. And then there were other, Richard Casaro, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Gary suggested to us that we should look at Richard Casaro's work.
Yep.
And so, Brad right now has said to me, I should look at somebody else's work. So everybody has a fascination about this subject, and they're doing their own research as well. And so we're pulling in people from the research that everybody's doing around this subject. And it really is a beautiful thing.
A funny thing, and this is just like kind of a side note, like you mentioned Richard Casaro, he helped out on the Jaw Symposium back in July. We've had him on the show. I think we had him for part of the John Anthony West Egypt month. And
yes,
I think I mentioned to him at one point, he's actually one of the first people from this community who followed me on Twitter.
Yay!
And I'm like, it's like I've been following his work for a long time, and like you look at Egypt and you don't necessarily consider Richard Casaro as somebody who could fit into that mold, but he's more of a pan-global, consistency guy. He's the guy who's trying to put the parts together from all of these different areas and trying to find the similarities between them. And the idea of the triptych, which has been his calling card, it fits very well in with the idea of, okay, well, you've got your small door in the center, and you've got your two larger doors outside. And this seems to be an imagery that has been, passed on from Egypt to East Asian architecture to North American ancient architecture, South American architecture, European architecture, even when dealing with things like the cathedrals and how that sacred not only was sacred geometry used, but the same type of imagery was used in terms of the two larger hemispheres, the left and the right, and the idea of the pineal gland in the center. And this also moves on to like Leonardo da Vinci's work and his paintings and how that was used to diagram the human brain from a side view. And you've seemed to bring together all of these individuals who may not necessarily seem like they have parallel work, but each one seems to be part of a puzzle that is making up a whole. And so if you've had individuals like Richard Casaro, who else is on the research list? Because themagicalegypt.com does have the photos, and some of them are very well known. But the names may not be known to certain individuals. Can you speak to that?
Yes. Well, I mean, look, for instance, okay, you were talking about the left-right hemisphere. It's really interesting because Led Scranton, who I know you love and who I just absolutely adore, his research, you might think, has nothing to do with the triptych, but he has this whole left-right story that plays into it as well. We have Tony Wright, who is coming up. He is a researcher who looks at the hemispheres of the brain based on how humans evolved from the kind of tropical jungle belt and out of that. And he has an amazing story that fits right into this whole story that we're trying to tell about the development of the brain. We have Gary Lockman, who has a book on the history of consciousness and a new book on the imagination, who is looking at also consciousness aspects of, what was consciousness like back in the day? What is it like now? What does that mean for what we can evolve into? Now, when we get into episode 4 starts to tell a story about the Kundalini being symbolism that is appearing to us in what we're seeing. Then you have Dr. Aaron Cheek, who talks about alchemy. Okay, so he's going to be coming back into the story as our Kundalini kind of journey takes place. We have another wonderful person, Hereward Tilton, who was a friend of Aaron's that Aaron brought to us that is not even on the site yet to enable to tell that story. We go down a shamanistic path, and we have Rick Strassman coming back into the show. We have Graham Hancock talking about shamanism as well. Who else? I don't want to forget anybody. This would be terrible. I mean, as an example, I should pull up my page and tell you who else. I'm talking to a researcher right now by the name of William Megan, and he is really interesting because he has broken down the symbolism of the Genesis of the Bible, of the Old Testament, and he is going to, and his story basically would fit into Richard Cassaro's story and into the symbolism of these, why these things are occurring all over the world. Okay, so we've got Brad. Now Robert is just absolutely amazing. um, Robert, as you know, you love Robert Baval, and we've got an interview with him that we're going to be bringing in and tying into the story as well. And just because Robert is really fascinating in the respect that he has been going on his own personal journey. And evolving his own story, and his story is entwining with ours. So we also have on our sheet here Lon Milo Duquette. Now, Lon Milo is a very interesting gentleman who is very steeped in the Western magical tradition. So when you see Lon Milo and you see you see Stephen Skinner. Stephen Skinner has a lot of books on Egyptian Greco magic, and then you see Peter Lavanda, who also understands Western magic and also Tantra, and there's Mantek Chia. You can kind of see where that storyline is coming together. We have two Australians on the page. We have Colin Hayter, who's doing some remarkable research on the story about Egyptians in Australia. And we have Max Egan, who also is an amazing Australian researcher. And so that storyline is going to tie in. So you can kind of see a little bit of where we're going by who's on the page.
And funny story. So, Colin, I think you were advertising the show, which again, it was last minute. We didn't schedule it, weeks in advance, yes. But still. And I know that he liked the Facebook page, so I'm like I know that guy, and I know that he's doing a very interesting and very controversial part of Egyptian research, which is based on findings from the west coast of Australia, and that there were hieroglyphics potentially found in the west coast that essentially was from a lost ship that had been out to sea at one point, whether it was doing trade or was exploring, and just got blown off course in the Indian Ocean, and may have wound up on the west coast of Australia.
Well, actually, he's evolved the story a lot more. That is kind of that story is the traditional interpretation of those hieroglyphs.
Okay.
And what Colin has done is he has taken that story, really researched it, found validation for it in certain papyri, and taken the story to a place that is so much more detailed and so much more in depth. And he has tied it in with the indigenous story here, with the indigenous people. And so we have this indigenous legend weaving together with this Egyptian story, and it really, really is fascinating. And it's going to take a while to tell that story because there's so much data and there's so much of an evolution from the original story. But yes, I mean, every time I see him, he has. And it's mind-blowing, too. I mean, it's absolutely one of the most mind-blowing stories that is new information. And so we really, once we get through these 6, we have to sit down with Colin and really look at what he's doing and figure out how we're going to work with the information. But it's mind-blowing stuff, absolutely mind-blowing stuff.
And how much has, from the start of filming and even from the start of the concept of the idea, obviously, if you're looking at a 10-year gap between the start of one or the end of one and the start of another, there's a lot of information that gets added to the research compendium that is pulled from. But from how much has it changed in that period compared to now for various individuals?
Yes. Well, I would say that the storyline if you can imagine the idea, the concept really hasn't changed. The concept has been there all along, but it keeps getting fatter and fatter and fatter as we get access to new researchers. For example, Dr. Aaron Cheek, we went to him because of his interest in Shwala and his knowledge of Shwala. But because he stayed with us for so long, we found out that he has this incredible knowledge of alchemy. And so we started talking about alchemy and how that fits into the story. And then he introduced us to people that were adding to the story as well. So the story is getting validated and verified and bigger and bigger and bigger as we go along. But the general idea, what was the concept of the story we wanted to tell, really has remained the same.
And again, Dr. Aaron Cheek, who's a good friend of the show, and who is one of the most foremost authorities on esotericism with regards to Shwala de Lubix, and also from what I can recall from discussions that I've had with Chance, also has quite the karaoke voice. So something he doesn't like
Yes!
having been known, but I'm saying that right out there. He's not just incredibly intelligent and one of the best people you'll ever meet, but also a fantastic singer. So that is...
He is fun. He is, he really did stay with us for probably about 3 months, and we miss him terribly. I was going to actually have him back now, but when I was at the point where I was to organize the tickets, I wasn't feeling well. This year, for all of any of our viewers that might be customers that are saying, where are my DVDs? I've had a really bad year health-wise, and I just haven't been myself, and I'm starting to come back now. So we've booked Aaron to come back out in February, which will be wonderful. But he is lovely and fun and knowledgeable. And one of the things that I wanted to say about the making of Magical Egypt, the most important thing that strikes me is the pity, the tragedy, the just pulling my hair out, that the best moments of the show happen when nobody's around. So, there'll be Aaron and I sitting down and having a conversation at 10 o'clock in the evening, and I'll be, why didn't we have cameras rolling? And I had the beautiful, joyful experience of having Laird Scranton meet Lon Milo Duquette in a hotel room in Minneapolis. And those two gentlemen, you would think their stories are completely disparate, but we had Risa and Isaac, which is Laird's son, and Lon and myself all in a hotel room, and these two guys were filling in for each other holes in each other's knowledge and making each other's story better stories than they were before. And it was magical to see that. It was just absolutely magical. And again, I had a camera, but I couldn't figure out how to use it. But those kinds of things, I wish I could bring those things to my goal one day, if we ever make enough money, is to have all of our people together in a room so that they have the opportunity of talking to each other instead of having Chance and I as the middleman, because I think some real magic will happen if we can get even 5 of these people together to be able to share research with each other. It'll be mind-blowing.
I would be remiss if I did not mention that this is kind of one of the similar aspects or goals of this show, is the ability to try and combine knowledge and to try and combine stories to gain understanding. For us, we're trying to find Atlantis, essentially. That's kind of the main goal for me. It's like, did Atlantis exist? What kind of steak did they make? Did they have scotch? Was it not called scotch? These very basic questions that you're trying to piece all these, these disparate pieces of information together that most people may not necessarily consider as compatible. And you've interviewed so many individuals, and we've had the opportunity to do what we're doing right now on the show. And for any of the interviews that you've had, what would be one of the more interesting? Do you have any interesting stories that can be told of either struggle to set up an interview or to set up an information share that it may not have gone what you had expected or required a fair amount of your poise and amazing ability to problem solve to actually make it happen?
Look, I have to say, when I was a producer, my joke was there was never a production that would happen without me learning something, because every single aspect of every single shoot and production, you learn something because something goes wrong, right? So there's really not a time that I can tell you that something didn't go wrong. I mean, we had Robert Lawler, who is a very interesting, again, Robert Lawler was the person that translated Schwaller de Lubitsch's book into the Temple of Man that everybody has. So we had that guy staying in our house. And that guy, when we shot him, like audio disasters, like we'd go to a place of our home that sounded really quiet, but for some reason, all the traffic noise would come up, so there's always something that goes wrong. But in terms of good stories. I mean, for instance, Stephen Skinner. We'd never met Stephen Skinner. We went to Sydney to shoot Stephen Skinner, and again, we had a great interview, and then we get to sit with the man for 3 hours having lunch, and the wisdom and the knowledge and the passion for he is a Western magician. He has actually taken all of the papyri and translated and tested the magic spells of ancient Egypt to verify whether these spells work or don't work. I mean, this is unbelievable kind of research. We have Frater Ashen Chasan, who has also done the same thing, taken magical spells, tested them to make sure that they work. And Stephen Skinner has had to translate them from Greek, and it's amazing work. And to sit and be able to ask questions is fantastic. So the shooting is great, but meeting these people and spending time with them is just the gift, absolute gift.
And what is your process to set up, or at least discover new researchers? Do they come to you? Do you find them and approach them? Is it just kind of a happenstance that occurs?
Yes, sweetie. I would say that we look for. We have very, very, very specific things that we're trying to validate and verify. And so in our research, we will find, for instance, in the episode that I'm in, that is one of my favorites, we're looking at the idea of the hypnagogic state. Okay, so Gary kind of came up with the germ of the idea of the hypnagogic state. And so we needed to really understand and explore that more. And so in our research, Gary Lockman came up as having written a lot on hypnagogia and also the entire idea of consciousness throughout history. And so in our research, he was speaking to what we needed. I reached out to him and got him. So it's basically we're looking for people that and they're all over the place. We have a neuroscientist that's coming on the show. So people that look at information that validate the storyline that we're trying to tell. And then so we reach out. Nobody's really come to us except Colin Hayter was a really interesting story in the respect that he dialed the phone looking for somebody and got me and had no idea that there was even a magical Egypt. I don't even know how that happened, but his story is full of synchronicities. This is one thing that's amazing, I have to tell you. As you get into these stories, Laird has synchronicities that happen to him that blow your mind. Lon has synchronicities. Colin has synchronicities. Hearing about these little things that happen to further the research fascinate me, just absolutely fascinate me.
And I know Laird's talked to us, at least he's talked to me several times about with certain research that he had stumbled upon, and there are certain individuals who may have said something to him with regards to the research, and it made things click, it made things move forward, or at least it said, okay, well, this is something I need to be able to do, and it may have evolved into what is available now, and it's like you're either in the right place at the right time, or there is no right time, and you're just there, and the information's going, that message of, hey, you may want to take a look at this. It's just going to keep hitting you every now and again, like a notification reminder on your phone that you can hit snooze on, and then 5 minutes later, it's going to pop back up again. Um, yeah,
Laird had a book show up in the mail that was the exact book that he couldn't buy, and
yeah.
you know what I mean? That kind of thing, right? Okay. So, Colin calls this number looking for help and it's magical Egypt. And, it just, and once you get into his story, the synchronicities also, like Laird's, are crazy. And to me, that is magic. And it is the sign of somebody that really is getting into their research. It's magic. It's magic at that point.
Like you're riding the wave, for instance.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
Bram from YouTube chat, as you know, you've been on the show. You've helped start you've watched the show, so
Yes.
we get questions from the audience. And
Yes.
first, Rocky is and Rocky Boom. Shout out. I know you may have gone to bed at this point, but you'll come back to it at some point, and I'll tell you. He's asking if you've ever heard of John Ward, who is an Egyptologist. He's worked with Scotty Roberts. Are you aware of his work or not?
No, I'm not, sweetie. And somebody asked me about somebody else the other day, and I looked them up, and I weren't familiar with them either. And it might have actually been John Ward. What is his name of his new book? Does John Ward have a new book?
That would actually be a very good question. I know that he's been out at his archaeological site that just finished. I believe it's 13th season. I'll send you the information. And John, please, brother, don't hit me on that one if I've forgotten. Getting a lot of information thrown at me the last couple of days. I'm trying to keep up.
Exactly. But no, look, there's a lot of people, unfortunately, that because we're looking for specific things that we might miss. And so tell me about John.
I'm actually not too familiar with John's work. I know that he's had a certain, he's worked with Scotty Roberts on researching the Exodus story, which is, I believe that he and Scotty released a book a couple of years back. It might have been 2015, maybe earlier, with regards to that. It's more around, from what I can understand, and again, I'm probably way off, his published work is more based around the biblical theory, or at least a biblical story, and trying to ascertain that. I could be way off on that.
Yes.
Yes. But beyond that, the other question is coming from Bram, our resident Discord server admin, as well as one of our. He's going to be helping me out with the show in the next couple months. So again, thank you very much, Bram. And he is asking for the magic that was tested out. And I know that there are some magic that can be somewhat, like, okay, well, I don't like this person, so let's make this part of him, shrink up and fall off, as it were. Did it work? And if so, do I need to worry about any of this stuff in cases?
Look, I have to say, here's what I bought Stephen's book with the haste, that I was on fire, is you know what I mean, after I met with him. And I'll give you an example. Frater Ashen Chassan is the perfect, and I just finished reading his book. Yes, the magic works. The magic requires incredible discipline, time, effort, dedication, devotion to do. And if you have that, an incredible knowledge of astronomy and what day works with what mineral, works with what angel to affect what you need to have happen. So the fundamental knowledge going into it is so huge, as well as the dedication, effort, timing, all of these things. So the kinds of things that, for instance, Frater Ashen Chassan is doing is, for instance, he has called into a skull a house deity called Hiram.
That's a name that I know.
And yes, and Hiram helps him with magic, helps him with his studies, has all of this wisdom and information that he is able to partake of because he has able to call in a house spirit into a skull. And to do that, he had to do magic. But he's also called archangels and demons, I'm guessing, to further his knowledge of the universe and cosmology and all of those kinds of things. Stephen Skinner, in his book, there's simple things like making your lawsuit go the way that you want it to go, right? So getting having luck in business, having luck with women, all just lot. I mean, the book's that thick and it's Egyptian magic, so it's like so much of it is mundane, really mundane stuff, and yes, but to be able to do these things, you have to have fundamental. So I've kind of decided that in this lifetime, I'm not going to go there. I might just try to employ somebody to do it for me. But yes, I mean, the story is that these things actually work. Stephen Skinner, for example, has a great story that he told us that I don't think is in the interview. He had his house robbed and everybody took all, like literally everything out of his home. And so he did a magic spell that was something to do with getting lost goods returned. And what happened was, after he did his magic spell, the thieves called him up and said, "Hey, would you like to buy your stuff back at at an expensive dollar amount?" And so he was able to, because of that phone call, have the police track them and get all of his stuff back. So, did the magic spell cause the thieves to call him? That was his intent, and it happened. Crazy, huh?
I got to try some of these. At least we'll see. Well, like the luck with women, it's like it's not really luck; it's more of a skill. But
Well, they're not so much. For instance, the spells are kind of awful when it comes to women. It's like the woman will starve to death unless she unless she claims her love for you. I mean, some of them are kind of really interesting. I can the book's right there. I can grab it if you want and read you a few. But they're really. I mean, there a lot of them. For instance, I wanted to do one. There is a house. There's a sweep in Australia. We have sweepstakes for houses, so you can buy, instead of buying a lotto ticket for money, you can buy a lotto ticket to win a mansion. And there was one I really wanted to win, and there was no spell for how to win a house.
that's unfortunate.
Right. But, think about ancient Egypt and ancient Greece. So, that was the time. Those are the spells.
Now, this is something that I was able to find while we were discussing the magical spells. John Ward, he's actually one of the partners at, and I believe the photographer at the. I'm going to butcher this one, so please do get your drinks ready, people. This is at the Gebel El Silsila archaeological site in Egypt. I know that he's been there for the last couple of months after getting married here in North America. So again, brother, congratulations once again. And he worked with Scotty Roberts on a pilot of a TV show for History Channel called History Trippers, which was kind of like a steampunk, somewhat inspired in terms of like their aesthetic and dress, and they were essentially supposed to go around and to all of these archaeological sites and kind of give their view on it. And I think that actually turned into Scotty Roberts' children's books, Fox and Bear, which is kind of their adventures, but based on anthropomorphic animals, which is the drawings are absolutely fantastic. And I haven't actually read the book myself, but
I met Scotty. Scotty was responsible for me putting Laird and Lon together because he had a conference in Minneapolis.
Paradigm Symposium, I believe.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's somebody who's been working with Scotty for quite a long time, and I know he just finished his last the latest season in Egypt. So that was, I believe, why we had received that question. But that would be the extent of, at least that I know from his work. I'd want to be able to read more into it. And Rocky, sorry, I've been really busy, have not had much time to read anything. But that's just kind of the idea that there's so much work that's out there. You may not necessarily hear about it, or there may be work that's upcoming.
Yes.
What are some?
Look, there's a. Sorry, Dylan.
Oh no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say there's so much good work out there, and the scope of what we're doing right now, as I said, we kind of have the storyline, and possibly we haven't just come across John. There are people that we want to get that we haven't been able to get yet, but if John's work doesn't align with what we're currently telling the story, that may be why we haven't found him yet. But maybe we need to.
Now, and this is something that at least I can talk to Rocky on, and hell, I'll even send John a message if he's off of that. I believe he's currently on a boat on the Nile, traveling from his site. It may still be there. I know that he's traveling back to his home base there. But in terms of like you've been connected through Scotty with Laird, and that's how you guys got together as far as that part of the research. Now, who are some individuals that have been recently introduced to you that may not have been announced on the official story, or at least on the official storyboard? Is there anybody new that's upcoming?
Yes, indeed, Darren. So some of those people that are on the site haven't actually shown up yet on the show. But for example, the newest person is that hasn't been announced yet. We're talking to him is when Aaron did his doctorate on Shwala, Hereward was the person that oversaw that. And he is an author of many books, theurgy and alchemy and many things. And so he would be the newest person that we're actively talking about bringing into the show and hopefully shooting next week. Enzo Enzo. It's an Italian, he's a young neurosurgeon, and he does work on consciousness and the effects of entheogens on the brain. So he is a neuroscientist that's studying how LSD, for example, works within the brain and impacts consciousness. And so we're interviewing him on Monday, and he's not yet on the website. So those would be the two. The person that we're trying to get that we haven't had much luck with because he's writing a new book is the author of The Emissary and the Brain, Ian McGilchrist, because he really looks at both sides of the brain. Mm-hmm. So he's kind of evading us at the moment, but we would love to get him. So those are kind of who we're playing with right now.
Ian, if you're watching this, pick up the phone, man. We gotta get this done.
Yes, Ian McGilchrist, do it. He sent me an email that said he's not even looking at emails for 6 months. So who knows what's going to be happening, in the future. We've got a lot that we have to get through before we really start telling that story.
Now, how is the average episode constructed as far as a premise or a storyboard? What is the what's the creative process? And what is your process?
Yeah, well, really, truly, the show's a chance. Chance will say to me, get Ian McGilchrist, and I will attempt to get Ian McGilchrist. But anything, once the material is shot, which I will be part of shooting that, it's all Chance. Chance does the music. He scores the thing. He does the timeline. He does the motion graphics in the animation. So really, once it gets to putting the show together, that's all Chance.
And your part in that is it strictly the marketing side, or are you the, as you'd mentioned, kind of the, that force that kind of sets things in motion, or at least reminds him that this needs to get done. Every single great man.
Good luck with that.
Well, every single great man needs a great woman behind him. Yes. And in terms of making sure that we can.
That's right. I'm a great woman.
And, well, you think I'd be able to get half of the stuff that I'd be able to get done if it weren't for my wife? Like, forget it. I'd sleep until 2:00 in the afternoon every single day if it weren't for her. It's, there is a very important partnership, and with him being the creative side, you've obviously been more of the marketing side, the social media side, the public relations side, and
look, I do research. I really do. Like, for instance, Gary Lockman, I will take credit for, because I was the one that kind of found that research on the hypnagogic state, which is kind of why I'm in episode 3. So there are certain things that I will research. For instance, again, Dr. Enzo, I found him as well. But once it's shot, for instance, Gary Lockman, I didn't really know what that episode about. So Chance said, this is what we're looking at. Go find it. So I do get to do a little bit of research, which is wonderful. Not all of it ends up in the show, not all of what Chance does. But yes, predominantly I'm the I'm the get it done person, whether it's the marketing or the, Chance is in charge of promo because he studied that at school. But, marketing really is my side and getting things done.
And for your side of, we're going to get like really like into the behind the scenes stuff here. Because when we were doing the John Anthony West telethon back in February, yes. And I didn't believe, again, this is to my own ignorance, I didn't know that Magical Egypt had a Facebook page. Or,
okay.
So again, when I first approached, I'm trying to remember exactly what had happened. I think somebody had sent me a message saying like, oh, like Magical Egypt is like, they just mentioned you guys. And I'm like, holy shit, like, are you kidding me? Like, that's amazing. like we were this ragtag team operating from a bedroom, and we had no idea what the hell we were doing. And it's like this monolithic legendary production team had mentioned us in a YouTube video, and we felt absolutely special and mind blown. And you were in the video, and the video had said, okay, well, this is what's happening. I know that there's the telethon going on, and when I had contacted the Facebook page, you were the person behind the Facebook page.
Yes.
And how much of your day-to-day is dealing with the public and the individuals who maybe like myself, who may be completely starstruck or, awed by the presence of the individuals behind the production, and being that face of Magical Egypt? Like, what is your methodology? How do you approach it? And how did you fall into that particular, finding out that you were very good at that role?
Well, first of all, just like you and Alex are a team, Chance, it's really interesting because I think when people find out that Magical Egypt, for all intents and purposes, is Chance and I working out of our bedroom, they get shocked by that as well. And most of the time, the funniest aspects of that are when somebody rings up or types and they're unhappy with me for some reason, and they'll figure. I don't say, "Hey, I'm Venise, I'm in the show," or "I'm the producer." I just sign at Venise, and they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry for yelling at you. I didn't know that it was you." And they are very, very much appreciative of speaking to me. But basically, I treat everybody like I want to be treated myself. And so I don't have any methodology, my love. People have questions, I answer them. People have problems, I try to help them. People can't afford the show, I try to work a deal. And so I just treat everybody as if the way I'd like to be treated. And so it does pretty much take up my entire day between the production things and the customer support things and the product fulfillment things. My day is pretty much Magical Egypt, but I am blessed that it is, because compared to what I was doing before, I would much rather, the truth is the people that buy our show en masse are the most wonderful people in the world. They are intelligent, they are courteous, they are kind, they are just lovely. And so I am really blessed to be able to be interacting with that caliber of person on a daily basis.
And how do you use social media as a whole? Do you use any type of application? Do you just go into either you use Twitter as twitter.com? Do you have
I'm terrible at Twitter. No, I've tried HubSpot and things like that in the past, but I've tried so social media, because I come from marketing, okay, and I have marketed everything from golf products to beauty products to diet pills and penis pills and all kinds of crazy things. I am really blessed that marketing Magical Egypt is probably the easiest thing that I've ever marketed. Right? And I think it's because we have such a strong fan base that really all I have to do is get in front of them. So I'm terrible Twitter person. I really only kind of use that for announcements if I remember to do it. So predominantly what I do is I do marketing on Facebook, and I utilize our page on Facebook to kind of talk about things that are interesting. But I really am not as active as I have been for other clients in the past, because we're lucky that Magical Egypt per se doesn't have a competitor. There's really nobody else producing content, you know, like ours. So we really don't have any competition, and we have some great fans. So it's really very lucky. But I try to share things with people that I think are interesting, that people of people that would be interested in our stuff would be interested in the content that I'm sharing. But it's more of just an active marketing campaign on Facebook is really all I do. And I do that myself directly on Facebook. And if I do Twitter, I do that directly on Twitter. But having there's lots of things that I have done in the past that I don't need to do for Magical Egypt.
And
that makes sense.
Well, I'm assuming that a full audience profile and psychographic profile may not necessarily be, necessary when it's like, well, I'm kind of from the demographic and as well as from the psychographic profile that we're selling to. It's like, I'm the model. You don't need to have a full document for it, which, that is, it's very interesting to be able to say, it's like, what would I, what would I like? What would I buy? What would I look at from a standpoint of how would I want to be dealt with, interacted with. We'll use that euphemistic term.
Exactly.
And, everyone has their idiosyncrasies when it comes to Facebook. You show your personality very well. I tend to showcase my asshole with a heart of gold personality fairly well. At least I like to think so. And you reach your audience. There's the audience that is going to be really into it, and they're going to be into the brand, and they don't care about anything else besides the information that's shown. And there's people who buy into the back end of the brand, where they need to be able to believe in it. They need to believe in what it stands for, what it represents, and the people behind it, because they want to believe that it is something that is wholesome. And it's not just, as we mentioned, corporately produced or corporately demonstrated, because there's an actual soul to it then. And,
thank you, Jarlin. And look, I think one of the biggest things is that we were the most bootleg thing I've ever seen, for a while. Like we had people that weren't us had tens of millions of views of Magical Egypt, right? And so lots of people have seen the original series, right? And I think also the fact that Joe Rogan has made it clear that he really has enjoyed the show on more than one occasion really helped with the younger generation getting involved.
And it's true, and I know one of the things that he's actually described, which was his wife mentioning, it's like, what, you're watching fucking Magical Egypt again? And I've actually had my wife say that, where it's like, Chris, what are you doing? I'm like, watching TV. It's like, you're watching fucking Magical Egypt again, aren't you? I'm like, yes, I am. And,
you can't buy that, darling. You can't buy that, There's just...
But it's really well, it's not necessarily for everyone, as it were. You have to have a certain amount of background within, understanding that there's more behind it. And some people, it's not usually within their wheelhouse. Like, it may not be within their wheelhouse. They may not have that particular interest. Like, some people love pop music and country music and Survivor, which is an awesome TV show. And, some people don't, or some people do, but they're also like, well, I want to know about, the meaning of the universe behind the veil, as it were. And how have you noticed the breakthrough? Like, are there people who have had that, what you see is what you get attitude, who have been exposed to it, who have expressed to you, I came to, I came like a babe in the woods, and you opened my eyes to so much. Like, have you been noticing this with the new series that's been coming out?
I would say that what is more likely is that people had the cognitive dissonance that what they had been told didn't make sense. I don't think that I have converted people. I don't think that people who believe that the pyramids were made by slaves are our audience. I think it's people who didn't make sense. And then they saw this and then they're like, oh, thank you. Like, we have some lovely friends when we did our Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. We had some lovely friends that just because they were friends, bought the series, and they're watching the series and they're overwhelmed, completely just overwhelmed. and they're like, wow, that's amazing, and you guys have done such a great job. But my cousin Bradley, who I love dearly, would never enjoy the show. You know what I mean? There are people that are just not going to enjoy the show. And that's okay, because we're not doing it for them. We're doing it for you, and we're doing it for Elaine and people that are passionate about this kind of information, because it really is. It's evolved. It's evolved information.
And how have you noticed that the perceptions have changed from those who are, may have been Magical Egypt 1 adherents, or I'm going to say adherents, who loved the original series and have gone into the second. And again, I went into the second knowing that it was coming out, but having gotten to know you guys and going, okay, well, I got to see what Chance is up with this stuff, because knowing that the technology has changed so much from Magical Egypt 1 to Magical Egypt 2, and the tools that he had available and what he can actually do with those tools, I was very interested to see what that, and it blew my mind from a standpoint that it's like, this is one guy doing this stuff, and crafting all of the imagery that's being seen on screen. But to those who may not necessarily have known it, and who came into Magical Egypt 2, knowing the original series is more based around the nuts and bolts history and the prehistory of Egypt and John's work. What is some of the feedback that you've received, and some things that have surprised you that people have said about the new series?
Oh, what has surprised me? I would say one thing, which is, gosh, I don't even know how to answer that. If I get comments, the comments that I get are, love the new series. Thank you. You know what I mean? So I really haven't had people come to me with in-depth analysis of the show, with the exception of William John Megan, who is in the show, coming up in the show, and disagrees with some of our points. So really, I haven't had, or he wants us to extend some of our points more than disagree with them, I would say. But no, people just say, love the new show. I really haven't got any detailed feedback, sweetie, on... I mean, I hear you're taking too long. I hear, can't we get them sooner? You're killing me. I'm dying here. But no, I really haven't had specific feedback. Okay. People will say to me, oh my God, I'm so glad you've introduced me to Casaro or Osborne or whoever it is. I'm going to research them now more. Thank you for that. But no, really not anything specific.
And in terms of the delivery, how did you kind of decide on your streaming of the series?
Basically, I figured I watch Netflix, and I love Netflix, and so there has to be something out there like Netflix, because I'm amazed at how many people buy DVDs these days. To be honest, I would say 50-50 DVDs and stream, but I wanted to be able to just offer to people in the format that I enjoy. Like, somebody said to me, do you have Fire Stick, Amazon Fire Stick or something? And I'm like, I have no idea what that is. And maybe because I'm in Australia, we don't have all that tech. But I'm trying to make it available to people in the manner in which they would like to consume it.
And for the average amount of, say, those that are currently consuming it, are you delivering DVDs right now in addition to?
Yes, I'm doing. Yes, if people buy DVDs, they get DVD and stream, and if people buy stream, they just get the stream.
Okay, so for the amount of DVDs to the current stream, is the mass amount right now streaming, or is it like, are there still those adherents who are like, okay, I want the
50-50.
It's about 50-50. And for high definition, are you doing Blu-ray?
No, sweetie, we're not. We use Kanaki as our distribution method, and Kanaki do just standard high def, but not Blu-ray. No. The reason that we do that is because, again, going back to that kind of monolithic impression, we really don't. We do this. We eat. We go on a holiday once a year. It's not making us, at this point in the evolution of Magical Egypt, kind of money to be able to go out and buy 1,000 Blu-ray DVDs at a time and just have them sit on them. And so we're using Kanaki to be able to deliver on demand.
Okay. Well, and for for the audience size that, even though there have been, I'm going to say tens of millions, hundreds of millions of potential people around the world who have watched the series, or at least hundreds of millions of views by tens of millions of people, because each one of us is going to watch it 10 or 15 times. Come on, people.
Yes, that's
we
true.
admit that. Even though when the new series has come out, it still takes a little bit of time to have traction among the wider audience. That there's a certain adoption phase, and you've got your bell curve.
We haven't even finished it.
So
it's so yeah.
So when you were looking at the first series and comparing it to the second, as far as adoption or consumption, has there been a relatable bell curve that you've noticed between the two, or is the first just an anomaly that was like a lightning in a bottle, and it just demanded a follow-up that needed to be extremely well researched and well versed to complete the story? How exactly, what do you attribute the first of the series to its success, and how are you trying to not emulate that success, but bring it to that same audience?
Well, it wasn't, sweetie. Really, I mean, the truth of Magical Egypt is that, as I said, we were in direct response marketing, which is television, selling things to people on television. And this is really an important subject that I want to get into, because I think that people have no idea how much suppression of information there is in America in particular, because that's where we were trying to do it. But we had a television ad. So we did the series, we did a television ad, and the way that television worked at that time is you would run an ad until somebody in the company higher up got to see the ad. And so they would run the television ad, and then they would come back to us and they would say, no, we have to pull your television ad because you're speaking about religion. Please say, put a super on there, said that this is not a religious story. So we would put a super on, and they would come back and they would put the super saying this is not a religious program. They'd put it on, then they would take it down for another reason. And because I said before I'm a little bit of a bulldog, I pursued the powers that be about the television commercial, why they wouldn't allow us to air it, to the extent that all they would come back and say to me is that the higher-ups said, no, we're not going to run this television programming. So Magical Egypt originally started out with a nice bang. People were interested in it, and then we were shut down by the television stations. We had a similar thing happen when I have a program. It's called Energy Sex, and it's not really tantra, but it's more about the energetics of making love with people that I was teaching. And I found a very similar thing. I didn't even try to put it on television, but I got through Google. I had to go on Google Adult. They kept telling me that I had to change things, and it was really, they said it was the offer, so I changed the offer. They said you were making claims. I got rid of the claims. Everything that could possibly go wrong, or everything that they said was wrong with my program, I took it off, and they still wouldn't run it, but they would run porn commercials on the same Google Adult. So what I've come to understand is that there is some superstructure or infrastructure that really doesn't want information out there that has the potential of enlightening people. And I've run up against it hard. And so the first Magical Egypt really was a commercial failure from our perspective. And it had a huge life, as I said earlier, of people who were bootlegging it on YouTube. And so tens of millions of views of the series really was the thing that allowed us to build an audience to kind of have this one at least pay the bills, if you will. Right? So, yeah, we're lucky that Facebook doesn't have that same infrastructure built into it right now. And I believe that Zucker's just trying to blow out as much money as he possibly can. And so he lets all kinds of things go on without claims now. And so we're not running up against that same brick wall that we ran up before. But that really hurt us when the first series came out.
And at least it's kind of a testament to the information speaking to people, because if you've got word of mouth that is continuing the message on, even though you're not able to promote it through mainstream channels, it goes to show
Yes.
that it's at least touching people on a level that may not necessarily hit the mainstream, but the mainstream
Yes.
is this giant monolithic general demographic that people talk about, but you're going to have subsets of that mainstream that are like, well, like, this speaks to me. I want to know more about this. And they're going to tell their friends
Yes.
about it. And they're going to be like, holy shit, this is awesome. I want to know more about this. And you reach that viral, like, you made things viral when things were still, becoming viral as far as like an actual statement within,
I think it was viral. Yeah.
yeah, like,
I mean, hundreds of millions of views or tens of millions. I can't even remember. Chance knows. He comes and tells me how many views, and it's a huge number, and I know the number of people that I took down, and I really wasn't paying attention to it. After Magical Egypt 1, we kind of went back to commercial work, and that's why I get to be executive producer, because I was kind of paying the bills through my commercial work at that point. And it's just horrible. I think the reason that I'm sick today is because of the commercial work I was doing this time last year, honestly, And so it is very lucky that so many people got to see the original show, and it really was viral, and it was so different, And as I said, John, in this civilization at this time, books just don't carry as far as television did. So when we were able to take John's ideas and put them into video format, it really just mushroomed at that point.
now, Joe, I'm going to say fucking Friday, because it's FKN Friday for his name. He's asking, yes, the powers that be do not want it out there, but why is the question?
Yeah, exactly. Why is the question? I believe that there is stupid people are easier to control. People that don't ask questions, people that are zombified in front of their television, that are enslaved, debt slaves that have to work 9-to-5 job, really don't have the time and the energy to educate themselves. And that's great because they're easy to control. They're easy to fool into the Democrats versus the Republicans storyline. They're easy to convince into agreeing with, obey with the kind of ideas that they want to perpetuate to be able to control the populace. I mean, controlling the populace is really the biggest concern of the government. And so if people are smart, if they're having Kundalini experiences, if they decide that they start to question things, if they become like me and say everything I've been told has been a lie and start investigating myself, I don't buy packaged food. I don't buy medicines. I don't go to the doctor except the hospital if I need to. But I don't buy into these institutions that are keeping America afloat. And so they really don't want people like me. They don't want people like you in society. And so if they can keep away information about sexuality that will cause you to become enlightened, or information about Egypt that will cause you to ask questions and do your own research, that's part of the problem.
Now, you did speak on this, and again, this is one thing that I'd like to be able to at least approach, because you are a very magnetic personality. And the comments that I've been reading in I should say, it has been Venise is amazing and awesome and very well spoken, and then there's the male demographic who, again, guys are guys, and it's like Venise is very.
I love the male demographic.
So there is the idea that, okay, so you have a very attractive personality, which is part and parcel with you just being very personable and being very attractive as a person. Now, how has this been a hindrance as well as a I'm going to say, help to your work and trying to get not only the commercial work, but also the Magical Egypt word out there, especially with the new series?
Really, it hasn't. In terms of Magical Egypt, it really hasn't come to play because, as you said, most people are talking to somebody behind a messenger, and so really most people really didn't even know who I was until episode 3. Or those people that bought the Great Work series that became Between the Two Magical Egypts might have been aware of me a little bit, but really I don't think me as a person really registered at all for most Magical Egypt fans. In terms of my commercial work, I've had all kinds of really funny stories. I've had, people pay me to do production and then come to me and say straight to my face, when I paid you for production, I got sex in that deal, and oh, look, I can see a tail, a fluffy tail.
So
Oh,
yeah,
how gorgeous.
that's Coco. She's the official co-host of the show.
She's gorgeous. She's a gray too, huh? She's beautiful.
Yeah.
Burmese gray, is that what they're called?
Yeah, she is.
My brother has 2, or had 2. I don't think he has them anymore. But so some strange things. I think, look, being a woman, I'm looking at all the Kevin Spacey stuff, and I look at it was the Little House on the Prairie Girl was outraged because Oliver Stone had her read some sexy lines for a rock and roll movie about the Doors, and she was devastated by that. I've had guys, pull out their penises at unopportune times, and as a woman, I got a pillow and I put it on their crotch and said, I'm not playing this game. I feel that there might be a little bit of a witch hunt going on, and I know the other girls in the audience probably are not going to be happy with me saying that, but the dynamic between male and female has been going on since the very beginning, and males have tended to be the ones that have had to go out on a limb to explain that there is a level of interest, and sometimes they do it well and sometimes they do it really poorly, and when they're doing it really poorly now, I think it's becoming a little bit of a witch hunt. But oh, hey, puss puss. How gorgeous. So I'm kind of looking at a lot of what's going on as, sometimes people go really beyond what they should and they have power, but sometimes the girls can kind of put a pillow on it and get out of those situations too. So in my professional career, I've had to deal with that sometimes and sometimes not. So does that answer your question, darling?
Well, it does. At least I wanted to be able to at least address the the elephant in the room, because I know that there. If things are nice to be able to look at, guys are going to be able to say something about it. I know that some girls will be able to say it as well. For me, it's like nobody's blind, but at the same time, it's like I try and look at that higher personality for people, and I try and look at people's hearts, and it's like there is more to individuals than just that physical side of it. So. But it's nice to be able to get your perspective from behind the scenes on that, because it's obviously something that if I'm getting the messages, it's probably come up in your career. So,
well, thank you guys. I appreciate that. Look, I mean, I think that the caliber of people that we deal with now, like, with John West and Laird and Lon and Aaron, I mean, everybody is so respectful and so wonderful, and I just can't get enough of them. And I think we're so blessed because we really do enjoy each other's company so much. So I haven't had to worry about it since I've been able to concentrate with Magical Egypt. But yeah, that's how men and women interact. So.
And
it's
again,
wonderful.
For anybody who's asking questions in the YouTube chat right now, this is what's going on in Discord. And again, it may have only been a couple of comments, but they were very respectful and in line with our community, which is one of, as long as you're not being a complete dick, you're not going to get a pillow on your face. So
or somewhere else.
So again, thank you very much for those questions and those comments, ladies and gentlemen. But let's address it and let's move on. Your own work. You said that there was a piece of work that was done between Magical Egypt 1 and Magical Egypt 2, and can you describe the work? I've done a little bit of research on it myself. Some of the information may have been behind a paywall, so I didn't have the means to look at it. But can you describe it?
Okay. Oh, yeah. Look, honestly, it was a very awkward situation. After Magical Egypt had come out, The Secret had come out, and The Secret was this huge hit. And because of Magical Egypt, people thought I would know a lot about The Secret. And and I mean, this is really weird, but a lot of people came to me and said, "Why isn't the secret working for me, Venise? Can you tell me why? Can you ask Lon why? Can you do? Why? I've been doing all the vision boards, and I've been doing, the happy thing, and I've been doing all the things that they said that you need to do, and nothing's changing and nothing's helping." And honestly, it happened so much that I thought that this is really a problem in society. I think that going back to the information, the people want to squish the information. There's a really powerful way of squishing the information is by flooding the market with too much information as well. And so The Secret came in and had an esoteric story, but it was told inappropriately and confused all of the people that were seekers and that really would have been interested, not all of the people, but a lot of the people that would have been interested in following this esoteric information. So the great work was a reaction to that. And it was really trying to put into perspective the laws, the universal laws. So what happened was Chance was not really interested so much in doing a kind of a service announcement, and he was much more interested in looking at the mysteries per se. And so the great work kind of starts off trying to address The Secret, which is very dated now, and turns into a look at the mysteries via kind of the 5 different levels and lots of different disciplines. So we have some tarot, we have some magic, we have, who I absolutely adore, you had him on the guy, what's his name, who's a druid, and he's just fantastic.
John Michael Greer.
John Michael Greer, right? He's just absolutely one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. So he's in there as well, looking at it from a different kind of perspective. We have a woman who is a meditation. She does esoteric meditation. So she's looking at it. So everybody's kind of looking at, the material plane, the mental plane, the emotional plane, the 2 more plane of exaltation, whatever you call it, but looking at that from all different kinds of mysteries so that people who are interested in the mysteries can really kind of get a great foundation. And that's what the great work is.
And how is this continued on with your current esoteric work? And how has that evolved, whether from Magical Egypt or on your own research? You do research for Magical Egypt, but you also do your own work on the side. So can you give more detail on that?
Very much like you described the peak of incredible interest and then dropping down.
I call it the bullshit ceiling.
Yes, the bullshit ceiling. I've kind of hit the bullshit ceiling, and I really, if anybody asks me, what do I believe? I have to say, I really don't know anything, sweetheart. I don't. There are lots of ideas that I like to play with, and I go through, in my own research, I go through stages where I'll research an idea, a particular idea or a particular body of work, and I'll play with it and I'll enjoy it, or I'll just push it to the side. But really, there's so much that I don't know that I will just, I won't lay claim to anything. I'll play with things, I'll discuss them with you. For instance, there's a body of work that I'm looking at now from a woman who has done hypnotherapy and past life regression of thousands of people. And she's reported back about afterlife and between life experiences. And a lot of that lines up with what my father told me about when, what happens when you die, from when I was 5 years old. And so I kind of stack up little pieces of information that validate each other. But in terms of, can I tell you what happens to you after you die? How does it line up with the Book of the Dead and those kinds of things? I can kind of pull pieces together, but I'm not at a place where I have any confidence in my own belief system, if that makes sense. I know what I don't know.
I can understand, and again, I do apologize if I'm batting at the air here. I'm petting Coco, and she seems to be shedding, so there's a lot of fur.
I can see. That's fine, no problem.
And we're coming close to the 2-hour mark on this show, and I know that So we try and keep things around 2 hours, but we can go as. I know the last time that you interviewed me, and I just babbled on for a good hour and a half, which was I think was amazing because you asked fantastic questions, and I'm trying to be able to find what have we not covered as far as information. I keep going back to that particular conversation that you and I had, which for the most part was in regards to the nature of the universe and it kind of how we saw things, and how is it you've been able to at least understand what do you see the universe as? And I know this is a very, very big, broad question.
I'll tell you what I'm investigating right now. Okay.
Go for it.
What I'm literally in the middle of investigating right now is the idea that there is, I'm going to use William Megan's word, a matrix of wisdom. That is basically, if you want to call it the Akashic record or, the unconscious mind, this deep or the superconscious mind, that there is a level of information out there that we all have access to. And what I'm playing with is I'm looking at the idea of, do I create the universe? Or is the universe created around this spark of me, which is kind of a solipsistic view, which I really have not had a lot of pleasure for in the past, but it's something that I'm trying to wrap my head around again. Because one of the things that's really interesting in his work is something that we're finding, this idea of this universal wisdom that is out there. People say, right now we have Rich Casaro saying there was a mother culture, Atlantis, all of the symbolism comes through that. There is another school of thought that Brad Clausen is looking at, that William Megan is looking at, that there's a universal blueprint of information that we have access to be able to pull down this wisdom from. And do they fit together? Can they work together? Are they at odds with each other? And how does that impact me as an individual? So there's lots of things that I can play with, but can I put my finger on, am I one drop in the ocean? Am I creating the ocean? I have really no ability to answer that, but I love playing with both of those ideas.
And what are some of the, I'm not going to say some of the answers because obviously this type of discovery is ongoing. What's your take on it right now? What would you say that would be the thing that's you're leaning more towards? Or what are you finding very interesting within your research?
I would say that if I look at the research that the woman that did the hypnotherapy between lives, and if I look at William Megan's work right now, the idea is that I don't necessarily create. Oh gosh, honey. I don't know if I agree with it though, sweetie. So I don't know. I don't know if I agree with it. But the idea is that there are pineal glands that create. I'll give you an example. When we look in episode 3, we talk about the fact that there is another realm of reality, that if you get into the hypnagogic state, you can go into a reality that is just as real as this reality. And in that reality, if you go, you can visit, and things have. It's the same reality, and things have changed. Just like if I go to Melbourne still exists, but things have changed. There's different cars parked there. So if you go onto DMT. Or if you do DMT and you go into that reality is just as real. As you'll see in the next episode, Rick Strassman has people reporting that reality is even more real than this reality. So in one respect, this reality could be a very persistent dream that we're existing in. That we think it's real because it's persistent, where the dreams that we have at night change. One night it's a dinosaur, one night we're in Paris, one night we're in Mars, and it's not persistent. And so this reality fills us, it makes us believe that it's actually real. So if you think about the imaginal realm as being real and the DMT realm as being real and this reality as being real, then this reality might not be as real as we think. And if it isn't, and if you look at the way that eyes work, and eyes aren't really seeing, eyes are creating imagery inside of our brain, the idea that we are just a pineal creating this very well could be what it is. Right? So the biggest question for me is really, what is reality? And I did this amazing in the Great Network, which is the social community built up for the great work. There was a woman that had a series of 7-day practices that you should do, one for 7 days, looking for the glitches in the matrix in reality. And I did that, and I found glitches in the matrix in this reality. And because of that, I'm very much open to not believing, like to exploring what is reality. So I don't have an answer. It's more that I'm exploring all of these different venues. Does that make sense?
And it does. And again, coming from YouTube chat, I know this was probably asked a couple minutes ago, so Bram, I do apologize. What do you think? At least at this point, I'm trying to be able to ask the questions to ensure there's a little bit of a flow and to make sure that I'm dropping them in at the right time.
Okay.
Now, Bram's asking, what do you think kind of a society we would have is if everyone were all woke? Would it be impossible to govern? Is that the goal? Is that control?
Okay, so that's a really interesting question, and I don't think we have to worry about it for a while. I listen to Mark Passeo quite a bit, and I find him interesting because he looks at the universal laws, and he looks at the trivium, the quadrivium, and really the natural laws of man. And a lot of people don't like Mark Passeo because he's very direct. But he has a lot of wisdom, and so I kind of look through his directness. And if you look at where we are, if you look at look at the Egyptians, I think the Egyptians are a really good example. The ancient Egyptians are a great example. The ones that were able to build these amazing monuments, the ones that had this organic and holistic technology that we're just beginning to understand. Harmony, peace, no wars is what my I don't think peace. People say peace. We live in a dualistic time-space continuum, right? So I think there's always going to be peace and the opposite of it. But does it have to be the wars that we have right now? If people were woke, I think that to start off with, people would start making fuss about things that aren't right. One of Chance's very mundane things that he gets upset about is that you buy food that contains things, that contains things that you don't want them to. For instance, he's allergic to MSG, so they don't say there's MSG in the food, they say natural flavors. So he ends up buying something thinking it's not going to make him sick, and it does. So in a woke world, they wouldn't put MSG in food, or if they did, they would say MSG. They wouldn't be trying to rip off and steal and lie and cheat and things. And so I think a woke world would be better. I think a woke world would have a government that serves the people rather than a government that does whatever the hell it wants, disregarding the people. So I think woke is good. I think there's lots of layers and lots of levels of woke. I've been through many different layers of woke and unwoke. But yes, people that are moral, people that actually have morality, like you, the fact that you got up and made that speech about the state of what do you call it? People trying to deliver information that's not true as true, that people doing that is woke, is, calling a spade is woke, and that's great.
I may have had one or two, again, as I said, like before we got on, like that was an overwhelmingly positive response. And again, thank you very much for everyone who watched it. But I got the one or two like you're a part of the Illuminati, like you're a reptilian, shapeshifter. I'm just like, dude, like, did you not, like, did you watch the video? Like, there are certain levels, from what I've been able to understand, there are certain levels, yes, of woke. There is your woke, but still kind of asleep. There's your woke as shit where, you're able to perceive multiple dimensions of reality all at the same time. Yeah. And then there's your whole, it's like, I'm kind of tired of this shit because it's all crazy and I'm going to go back to sleep for a little bit. And you're still woke, but you're just like, like, all right, so I'm woke. That's good. Like, what are you going to do with it? And, there's, it's that ability to understand that it's not necessarily about being awake. There is like, the status of being woke doesn't matter. It's knowing that there is a certain responsibility with coming from that.
Yes, exactly. Like, here's the thing. It's like you can be as woke as you want. If you don't do anything about it, you may as well be asleep, because there's the ideas and then the actions. And in this material world where everything is dense and material, you have to act against the material to have anything come to fruition, right? So yes, you're absolutely right. So doing what you did is a sign of being woke and putting it into play, and it's an example for other people. So it's absolutely fabulous. Yes, you have to walk the talk as well.
And there is also the I'm going to say the pitfalls of, if you're being woke but you're still being a follower at the same time. You can have individuals who are free thinking who congregate together because you believe in free thinking. There can be disagreement within a certain group or within a certain idea, and disagreement is not bad. Disagreement is how you progress an idea to be able to look at it from different perspectives. And you can generally tell the difference between when somebody's trying to push a narrative and when somebody's actually trying to be able to foster inherent and healthy discussion. And that's, healthy discussion's okay, but there has to be a certain amount of self-reflection with being woke. You can't just, you can't be woke and look at the outside. You have to be able to say to yourself, okay, well, what is it I'm feeling? How am I reacting to this? What is my perception of this reality that's being presented to me, and what is it about it that's making me react in a certain way? And it's those types of things that can cause a person to, like, question themselves and start to break through that cognitive dissonance that a lot of people find.
Yes. And the cognitive dissonance, if you have that, that's fantastic, because what you're realizing is that your feelings don't match what you're being told. So you're actually starting to feel, like you were saying, when you're having an argument with somebody, it's really great to go. Being conscious is the biggest gift that I can share with people, is that if you can be aware of what's happening with you while you're having a heated discussion and saying, okay, I'm feeling something. Why am I feeling that? He's attacking something that I believe. Now, is that valid? Is it not? If you can go into that and start analyzing it, you're going to learn. I think the trivium is logic, grammar. Part of the whole system of the trivium is the ability to bring your research up against somebody else's research and crash, so that the information, the idea, can get perfected and perfected and perfected and perfected. If you can't bring your information and argue it with somebody else, the truth is never going to come out. Okay, so the whole idea is the ability to mush those things until the truth is revealed.
And I believe the third one was rhetoric. And I know that you and I got caught on it the last time. And it's,
thank you.
Like, you've got your research, you've got your ability to think it through critically, and then you've got your ability to be able to demonstrate it and converse in a logical and rational manner on that particular subject. And, like, even for myself, it's like, there are times when it's like my rhetoric breaks down, and I'm just, and usually when that happens is when I'm just, like, fed up with something. It's like, you know what, like, I can't deal with this shit. Like, if I'm having a discussion with somebody and they're obviously, at least in my opinion, completely delusional, it's like, I'm not going to discuss this with you because I know that you're wrong. You don't know that you're wrong. And I don't have the time or the ability or the patience to deal with you right now, because it's like, if I'm going to deal, like, am I going to try and rationalize with a 2-year-old on why it's time for nap time?
Yes.
No, it's just time for nap time. You don't, like, that is the level of discussion that it can sometimes break down to. And you can sometimes, knowingly break out of that, and you're like, you think after the conversation, like, was that too far? Am I being too much of an asshole? And you're like, no, fuck it, like, it doesn't matter. It's
Look, it's age and stage too. When I was your age, I would be the same. I would dig in my heels and I would try to convince somebody of my opinion, And now at 52, you'll see on my page, if somebody says something that I don't agree with, I'll like it and move on. And I save myself so much grief and so much aggravation and so much time and, so many bad feelings. It's just like, if they want to believe that, that's fine. They don't have to believe what I want to believe. And if I am having a discussion, I have some great tools. And I'm like, I hear you, but I don't agree. And you don't have to get into kind of fistfights over ideas.
And
look,
yeah.
Oh, sorry, Don.
No, I was going to say, like, the same thing with I know that Bram had mentioned that there's not going to be any political talk. Don't worry, Bram, your advertisement stands. But there's a lot of political shit going on in North America right now. Some pretty heavy stuff. And it's like, maybe I see things from a certain perspective based on a lot of information that's being seen, and some people are getting information from other places. And maybe that information is not true. Maybe the information I'm not getting is true.
But it's worse than that, sweetie. It's worse than that, because Robert Anton Wilson talks about a reality tunnel, right? Which is it is your view of the world. And what's happened is technology is that Facebook has reinforced the reality tunnel, right? So if you're pro-Trump, all you're going to see is all the good things that Trump does. If you're anti-Trump, all you're going to see in the world is all the anti-Trump stuff, right? And as a result of that, your belligerence about your belief system grows exponentially because you never see what the pro-Trump person sees, right?
And which is one of the reasons why most people, when, at least in my case, I'm going to use myself as an example. I've seen things from their perspective. I've seen things from the perspective of other people, and I've come to like a third position on the matter. And like, if I've got a conclusion on it, it's like, this is, there is a long list of information sources that I have, and this is why. And it's to be able to have the discussion with people online, and this is the same with anybody else. So it's very fitting. It takes time to try and have that discussion. And, there was one time that Laird and I got into, like, I'm not going to say a heated discussion, but it was a very passionate discussion that him and I had on a very intellectual level, and he was doing it from his position from living in upstate New York, and I was doing it from my position based in living in Canada, and experiencing the same thing in Canada. And it's like, okay, so we both agree on the same thing fundamentally, but we're kind of approaching it from different perspectives. And, it's kind of that understanding, like, yeah, we both see it from the same perspective, but with slightly different modifications based on cultural differences. And that couldn't have happened if it didn't happen based on very lengthy online discussion, or as my wife likes to say, your internet fights, or your internet talk, which can sometimes take a lot of time, because getting to the root of a problem can take a lot of time. And we, in this age of social media, do not have that opportunity. We do not have that patience to walk through a particular subject. And I'll be the first person to say, shit, I'm guilty of that sometimes myself. And it's sad to say that in this day and age, we have been conditioned as people to look for the quick answer, look for the quick path, look for that easy answer and that instantaneous gratification, whether it's from just knowing that we're right about something. And we don't do what the ancient scholars and the ancient thinkers, those who have this wisdom that we profess to adhere to and admire. We like, shit, these guys used to talk around and get shit-faced drunk in, goodness knows what outdoor auditorium, talking philosophy until, could last 2-3 days. And I believe it was...
Is it the best thing ever, though? Like, do you remember at college you used to do that, though? I mean, you would sit around and with a bottle of wine or beers or whatever and just talk philosophy. And, I don't have really... I mean, when Aaron comes over or when, Lon hangs out or, then we get to do it. But really, you don't get to do it in daily life that much anymore.
No, you can't, because we have to pay the bills. We have to dedicate 8 hours plus to getting the money to pay those bills. We may have, certain social obligations or familial obligations.
Yes.
Yeah. And this takes time. Each one is going to be a time muncher.
So
just nibbling
don't
away.
waste time arguing with people on Facebook for no reason.
And
You know.
and this kind of goes back into. I'm going to try and transition. Watch this transition, people. So admit how awesome this show is when I can do this. So now we've talked about the real world and the alternate reality, which is social media. One of the questions is coming from Peter in the YouTube chat, which deals with that type of duality in terms of the alternate realm and this realm. And that's with regards to the equinoxes and how a day and night. What do you think as far as the equinoxes being day and night equal on our realm and the material realm, and is that potentially the same in terms of how time, I'm trying to see here, do you think that is very similar to how it is actually seen on the non-cognitive or the non-material realm? Whether that equinox can be a point where contact can be made, or whether that contact point of being able to pull from that information matrix, as you'd mentioned, being the strongest.
Well, as you would know, Laird would say that Passover is one. Is that an equinox?
Oh, that's a very good question. If it's I think it's around, like it's around.
Yeah, it's around
one of the
there.
equinoxes.
Well, look, I mean, this is something honestly that is outside of the area of my specialty. But Laird Scranton talks about 2 times in the year where that is indeed true. I think the first thing is that time really only is a creation of this material reality. So what does that mean in the non-material reality or in the imaginal realm or these other realms? I don't know if they even exist in those realities. But yes, I'm not the person, I'm sorry to answer that question, my love. I apologize.
Okay, so Peter, if this is the case, get in contact with Laird Scranton. I know that we talked about it on one of our shows.
Yes.
And he had mentioned it at length. And if it's one of the most recent shows, he was blowing my mind so hard that I just had this look of shock and awe on my face. So just be prepared to have your mind blown.
Laird is mind blowing.
Now,
just mind blowing.
Peter's mentioned that he has done it on that day, and if this is the case, and this is something that maybe requires further study, I'd love to be able to know more, Peter. So again, don't hesitate to add me to Facebook, and we can talk about it more when I've had a few hours of sleep.
I'll tell you who else is really interesting about that is Robert Lawler in his new book literally breaks down the cycles of time and pinpoints times when things are more easily transferred. So Robert Lawler, who was the person who translated the Schwaller de Lubitsch books, his new book might be of help to you as well.
And again, do you know the name of that book by any chance? All right.
Something of time. If you just Google Robert Lawler, time.
Obituary of...
I have...
No, that's... Geometry of the End of Time.
Yes.
At the End of Time.
There you go.
Proportions, Prophecy, and Power by Robert Lawler, which was published in 2013 in November, but believe it or not. And that I believe may be available on Google Books or Amazon, so you can go check that out, Peter. Now, I think there is one more question, and this is coming from Lee, and again, a little bit off topic, but I'll ask it anyway. And this is more in regards to the material realm, and he wanted to know, with all of the information that's been going on with regards to the abuses of power of individuals, whether you're dealing with males or females who have who may be preying on weaker individuals, whether sexually or not. The idea of the Australian Royal Commission's case into child abuse at boarding schools over there. Are you aware of it, and how much?
Yes. Well, I mean, put it this way. I'm aware that there is, I think it's actually might have finished, but yes, there's a big investigation about pedophilia all over Australia, particularly in schools and churches. But yes, there's a Royal Commission, so yes, I'm aware of it.
Okay. I know that we here in Canada have had commissions as well based on the residential schools with Aboriginals, or at least the Indigenous individuals who were taken out of their homes and essentially put into these schools, which were supposed to
Oh, yes.
take the culture out of them and westernize them.
Yes.
And large
Yes.
abuses had happened there. So is this inherent to power structures, or do you feel that the power structures attract these types of, this type of negative energy, I should say? Well, I'll use this on a negative standpoint because it's not necessarily normal behavior when it comes to rational, compassionate individuals. So is this more of a power attracting this type of energy, or do you think it's more of it's inherent within that particular type of structure?
I think that it is. I think that it breaks into two different. Let's put it this way. I watch a lot of YouTubes. It's nothing that we've really researched as much, but I think it breaks down into two different areas. I think there is one area where it is used to control, and I believe that they utilize pedophilia as a way to compromise people in power so that they can control them. I do believe that it is used to control. I think that there is another dark magical utilization of children for dark magical acts, for kind of even vampirism kind of aspects, which is really dark and really scary, and I really believe that it exists. Now, is that part? I think if you look at the history of the rulers, for example, Madame Bathory is a really great example of a ruler that utilized the blood of young women to maintain her beauty. Has that traveled down through the ages? I have no definitive answer to that, but we do have historical precedent. It's not, as I said, I really haven't researched it deeply, but I do believe absolutely that it's utilized to control the people in power. And I do believe there's a dark magical aspect to it. Does that answer that question?
I would say, at least from that standpoint, yes. And I'm going to get more into the esoteric in this standpoint, and at least from my own researches and from what I've been told from a magical standpoint, and from everything I've learned from Freemasonry and how this type of energy is supposed to flow in terms of being used towards a constructive end. Inherently, the universe is neutral. It's not necessarily good. It's not necessarily bad. Existence is good because we can all admit that waking up on a Saturday morning and watching cartoons is fantastic. Having that ability is great. But if the energy is, I'm going to say, like karma, for instance. Karma is real. If you put good energy out, you get good energy back. And this seems to be a recurring theme throughout multiple cultures and multiple belief systems and multiple realms of esotericism, that if you are going to be using energy for good purposes, you will get that energy back, and the universe will provide you, because you are inherently trying to add to it in a positive and constructive I'm going to use the term sustainable manner. You're trying to feed back into the system in a way that gives back. But if you're just taking from the system, then all you're doing is creating a negative feedback. All it's going to do is just, it's like if you, like that's, if you ever took physics class or chemistry class where you stood in a chain with a Van Allen generator, and it's like all of that energy is being pulled through, and all it is just going to a ground. You're taking out of that system, but the moment that you let go of, everyone lets go of that ground, all of that energy just hits you at the same time. Where, if you're looking at the flow of energy, if electricity being kind of a physical manifestation of that same, that same overall force, that it would seem that if you're doing bad shit, that bad shit's going to happen to you. So if you're doing bad shit, it's being done because there is some type of, I'm going to say superstition, or some type of misplaced belief that it will actually create a positive effect, where in all honesty, all you're doing is just hurting yourself in the long run.
But look at the Rothschilds, for example, okay? Or look at the Queen, right? Okay, so if anybody's using magic, just from a history lesson perspective, the Queen would be utilizing magic because, again, there's a history of magic. There was John Dee, for example, right? Worked for Queen Victoria Elizabeth. Anyway, the Queen doesn't look like bad shit's happening to her, per se. The Queen lives in a palace, is the richest woman on the planet, right? Okay, so the Rothschilds, same thing. Hillary Clinton, the same thing. I don't know. I don't know if it works like that. And I think that perhaps if you were to get Peter Levanda, who has the book, we've interviewed him for the show, Sinister Forces. He looks at the history of sinister forces and would really be able to add, I think, some really valuable insight to this discussion, because that is a very in-depth subject that he's researched. But I don't see the people doing bad things happening to them. I think that karma is very, very real. I think there is instant karma, but I think karma plays out on a much longer time frame than we can witness. And that's why the Kardashians, for example, have the lives that they have, and for example, like the people, John Anthony West, who added so much good information into the matrix, had to have a Kickstarter to be able to pay for medicine. So when I look at the people that I interact with, the people that are the biggest bringers of wisdom into the matrix, they all are struggling to survive. And Kim Kardashian has more money than God, right? So I'm not seeing the karma play out in as quickly as John West needs it to be playing out, or as quickly as Lon needs it to be playing out.
And also to the same fact, and again, I'm going to play not necessarily play devil's advocate, but when dealing with rich and powerful people, not to say everyone's good, because there's a lot of bad shit that goes on. If you look at the world nowadays, there's some powerful people doing some bad shit, and not necessarily for your best interests, but for their best interests and their friends' best interests. I've also found that in history, a lot of the accounts may or may not be necessarily written accurately, or it could be written by individuals who they hear a rumor, the person's unpopular because they're doing something that is unpopular, and there's going to be grossly outlandish things written about them. The Egyptians being, or in the Egyptians' case, at least if, later on in the Middle Kingdom and beyond, if you were an unpopular ruler, your successor may just wipe you from history. So these are things that are also a possibility. So for myself, it's kind of like sitting down with somebody who knows about as much as I do and trying to get their perspective on these types of things. Because, if you look at the Socratic, the Socratic filter, the idea of, okay, is this information useful to me? Is it something that is good or bad about the person? What's the motivation behind this thing? This being told, is this something that is propaganda, or is it, what is the source of the information? Why are they telling it to me? Is it going to help me?
Sure.
So from that standpoint, I always have to try and balance that. Well,
let me ask you: do you believe in past life, or do you believe in multiple lives?
I believe in the possibility. I've seen nothing
a reincarnation.
I believe in the possibility. Yes.
From my kind of the compilation of all the studies that I have done, I kind of have this feeling that we're here to learn things, right? We're here to learn things. And I kind of get the feeling that there really is no good and there really is no bad from that perspective, from the higher level, okay? And I kind of get the feeling that we come into incarnation to get it, and once we get that lesson, we get another lesson, right? And so good and bad, for instance, an example that I was given, which I think is a great example, is that I wanted to come into this life, let's say, to learn about abundance, okay? Being a bum on the street is just as valid of a lesson about learning of abundance as by being Kim Kardashian. They're both valid lessons about abundance. One is having it, one is not. From the perspective of up there, or wherever we come from, it's valid. But when you're down here, that's bad, that's good.
So it's not necessarily the experience as the way you perceive it, but it's what lesson can be learned from that experience that can help you either become a more compassionate person, become a more knowledgeable person, whether in this plane or the next, or
as a Mason, smoothing out the rough ashlar, right? Perfecting the
yeah, it's an ongoing process. It's an ideal to adhere to. It's like the idea of the perfect ashlar. This is an upright and moral person. You're the perfect individual in terms of being like good, in terms of like what is good, but still your average good person who just does what's necessary to be done to help others, to help your family, to be that kind, courteous, and humble individual. And nobody's perfect. You're always going to have that day to day, but it's the constant.
There's a really good example for me, and again, Mark Passio talks about, if you're given an order that is bad, right, is immoral, and you do it, okay, that is compromising. That is not being true. That is not perfecting your ashlar, right? Or is it?
I'm sorry. Actually, I had you cut out on that one on my headphones.
Oh, sorry, darling. I'm just saying that if there's something that's moral to do, and then you do, and then if it's immoral and you do it anyway. I don't know where I'm going with that. But anyway, I understand what you're saying. I just think that the process of perfecting the person takes possibly many lives to accomplish that.
And I don't think we necessarily say that from a Freemason standpoint. Like if we look at it from a standpoint of like if you die, you're accountable to somebody. So like all of your actions are seen and written down by some higher power, whatever whether you're whatever higher power your faith prescribes that higher power to be. And that's supposed to be motivation to say it's like the all-seeing eye will always be looking at you, because it's like you're always going to be watched. So like make sure you can remember the lessons that you've learned to not be a complete asshole every single day of your life. And that ashlar is supposed to be the thing that we judge ourselves against, to say like, am I that good of a person yet? What am I forgetting? What am I not doing? What is it that I could do to be a better person in a given situation? There have been situations.
It's a great tool.
Yeah,
it's a great tool. Yeah,
you're supposed to moralize on it. So, whether from certain standpoints and certain philosophies, it could take multiple lifetimes. It could take one. It could take an afternoon for your really astute person who is just really good at modifying themselves in terms of personality.
I love Alan Watts says just decide. Basically, Alan Watts says decide to be enlightened. I haven't been able to do that yet.
Well, what's enlightenment?
There you go.
I've had individuals who have spent time. Laura London, for instance, had spent time with Buddhist monks, and her outlook on how, or at least their perspective on how life should be lived, did not necessarily align with how she viewed the world. And who's to say that their right is, giving up all of your possessions and wearing robes and shaving your head and not eating anything that could take multiple meals to cook, for instance? Is that, is that right? Or is it wrong? Who are we really to say? That's the most interesting part about this journey, is that it's ongoing. You're constantly expanding your perspectives and constantly expanding your understanding to add to your own experience, which adds to your own answer to what the universe is to you. And it's different to me than it is to you, than it is to Bram in chat, that it is to Tyson, who's curled up into a ball here. He's just happy that if I give him pets at the end of the day, and when I wake up, he's going to be like, rub my belly. And for him, that's perfect.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well,
sweetie, I'm so sorry. I must go because I have people coming over and I have to cook food for them.
Which
I'm
works
so sorry.
because I was actually wrapping things up. That was the...
Oh, good. All right.
I'm like, we reached our target time, and this is a little bit longer than the average show, but you've taken the time and you've been very patient to join us here in the den today. And again,
I've loved it, sweetheart. Thank you so much. It's been really enjoyable. Sorry I couldn't answer every question, but I've really had a great time.
well, again, it's always a pleasure to converse with you over Skype, and I'm very grateful and very appreciative of you taking the time, and I'm sure that the denizens are as well. So I'm going to, I'm going to play. This is from our sandwich contest from earlier on in the year, but it's called Joy in the Restaurant, which fits in with how I'm feeling, as well as the fact you're cooking food. So we'll play that on the outro. There we go. Can you hear that? Please tell me you can hear that.
I couldn't hear it before though, sweetie.
You couldn't hear it before? Oh.
No, when you played the beginning one. So I think I'm not plugged into the music.
Ah, okay. Well, let's see if I can get that working. How about now? No. Okay. Well,
I'll hear it on the recap.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Den of Lore episode 70 / masterclass for November. It has been an impromptu show with one of the most amazing people that I know and have the pleasure of talking to, Vanese McNeill from Magical Egypt. Venise, again, thank you very much, and thank you all of you for waiting up with me on a Friday until 1 o'clock in the morning, Eastern Standard Time. And go check out the Discord server if you want to be able to continue the conversation. I'll be there for a bit. I know, Venise, you've got to cook for your company, and I'm sure if you can cook as lovely as you can converse and as lovely as company as you are, I'm sure they're going to have a fantastic time. This has been the 2017 live shows. We may still have one coming up from George Howard. Got to talk to him. He just finished tearing down a dam in the Carolinas so that river could flow once more. I'm going to let him rest a bit because he's had a ton of media obligations dealing with that. But that should come hopefully within the next 2 weeks. We'll let you know. And that's been it. So I'm going to switch on my next week's segment. Please tell me it's the right segment. Yes, it is. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much. And have yourself a wonderful holidays, Christmas, Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah, and Festivus for the rest of us. Let your feats of strength be many, and don't get into any fistfights during the air of grievances. So that is my closing statement. I'm just gonna fade this out here.